quiet town of Bardstown, Kentucky, a mother of five disappeared without a trace on a summer night in 2015. Her car was found abandoned on a desolate highway, her phone and keys left behind on the passenger seat. But Crystal Rogers was nowhere to be found. What followed was a case so twisted, so full of suspicious circumstances and tragic turns, that it would shake this small community to its core. This is the story of Crystal Rogers, a dedicated mother whose disappearance would expose dark secrets, lead to another murder, and leave a family desperate for answers. This is her story. Are you ready for the darkest stories Britain has to offer? Introducing our new book, Unreal True Crime, British edition. 35 shocking true murder cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Available now on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, or grab your instant PDF download from our website. Links are in the description below. Don't miss out. Get your copy today. And now, let's continue with today's case. Crystal Rogers was a 35-year-old mother living 45 miles southeast of Louisville in the heart of Kentucky. To those who knew her, Crystal was defined by one word: devoted. She was devoted to her children, devoted to her family, and devoted to being the best mother she could be. Crystal had 5 children, 4 from her previous marriage to Keith, and her youngest son, just 2 years old at the time of her disappearance, with her current boyfriend, Brooks Houck. Despite the end of her marriage, Crystal maintained an amicable relationship with her ex-husband. They understood that their children needed stability, and they worked together to provide it. But it was perhaps her relationship with her youngest son that best captured who Crystal was. Those who knew her would say they were inseparable, attached at the hip. Crystal's sister, Brooke, would later tell investigators that Crystal would never, under any circumstances, leave that little boy behind. It simply wasn't in her nature. Crystal's mother, Sherry Ballard, had raised a daughter who was reliable, responsible, and above all, communicative. Crystal always answered her phone. She always checked in. She always let her family know where she was and when she'd be home. It was this predictability, this constant presence in her family's life, that made what happened next so immediately alarming. July 5, 2015, started like any other day for Sherry Ballard. She tried calling her daughter Crystal, expecting to hear her voice on the other end of the line, expecting to make plans or simply catch up. But the phone rang and rang. No answer. For most families, a missed phone call might not raise immediate concern, but Sherry knew her daughter. This wasn't like Crystal. She tried again and again. Each unanswered call amplified the worry growing in her chest. 24 hours had now passed since Sherry had last heard from her daughter. With each passing hour, that worry transformed into something darker: dread. Sherry's maternal instincts were screaming that something was wrong. She began reaching out to Crystal's friends, her extended family, anyone who might have seen or spoken with her recently. The responses she received only deepened her concern. No one had seen Crystal. No one had heard from her. Then Sherry received a call from her other daughter, Brooke, Crystal's younger sister. Brooke had also been trying to reach Crystal without success. She had spoken with Brooks Houck, Crystal's boyfriend, and the father of her youngest child. What Brooks told her was puzzling, to say the least. According to Brooks, he hadn't seen Crystal since Friday night. He claimed that the last time he saw her, she was awake late into the night, playing games on her phone as she often did. Brooks said he went to bed, and when he woke up the next morning at 7 a.m., Crystal was gone. He assumed, he told Brooke, that Crystal had probably gone to visit her cousin's house to celebrate the 4th of July. But this explanation didn't sit right with anyone who knew Crystal. She wouldn't just leave without telling anyone. She wouldn't abandon her 2-year-old son, and she certainly wouldn't disappear without her phone. Sherry's concern had now evolved into full-blown alarm. She did what any mother in her position would do. She went to the police department and filed a missing persons report. While Sherry was at the police station, her son Casey received a phone call that would change everything. A friend had spotted Crystal's car on the side of the road, abandoned on the Bluegrass Parkway. Casey immediately contacted his father, Tommy Ballard, and together they rushed to the location. The sight that greeted them confirmed their worst fears. There was Crystal's car, pulled over on the shoulder of the highway with a flat tire. But Crystal was nowhere to be seen. For Casey and Tommy, this discovery was deeply troubling. They knew Crystal. If she had encountered car trouble, she would have called one of them for help. She wouldn't have just tried to fix it herself and disappeared. As they approached the vehicle, examining it more closely, they discovered something that made their blood run cold. Crystal's keys were sitting on the passenger seat. Her phone was there too. Her purse, with all her personal belongings, remained untouched in the car. Crystal Rogers had vanished, but she had left behind everything she would need to contact someone, to get help, to get home. This wasn't a woman who had walked away from her car by choice. Something had happened here, something terrible, and Casey and Tommy knew it. They immediately contacted the Nelson County Sheriff's Department. When investigators arrived at the scene, they conducted a thorough examination of Crystal's vehicle. On the surface, there were no obvious signs of a struggle. The car wasn't damaged beyond the flat tire. There was no blood, no broken glass, no indication of violence. But something caught the investigators' attention, something subtle but significant. The driver's seat was positioned in a way that seemed wrong for someone of Crystal's height. It was adjusted further back than it should have been. This peculiar detail raised an immediate question in the investigators' minds. Had someone else been driving Crystal's car? The police began canvassing the area, hoping to find witnesses who might have seen something on the parkway that night or early morning. But no one came forward. The Bluegrass Parkway, especially in the early hours, wasn't a heavily trafficked road. If something had happened to Crystal here, it had happened without witnesses, or at least without anyone willing to come forward. Desperate for leads, the police turned to the media. They released Crystal's photo and made public appeals for information. They asked anyone who might have seen anything, no matter how insignificant it seemed, to contact them. The response was heartbreaking in its silence. No significant leads emerged. Meanwhile, Crystal's father, Tommy Ballard, wasn't content to wait. He organized search parties, rallying community members to help look for his daughter. Despite the oppressive Kentucky heat and humidity making the searches physically demanding, many people showed up to help. They combed through fields, searched along roadways, looked everywhere they could think of. But there was one notable absence from these search parties: Brooks Houck, Crystal's boyfriend and the father of her youngest child. His lack of participation didn't go unnoticed, especially by the police. Here was a man whose girlfriend and the mother of his child had vanished, and he wasn't out there searching for her. It was a red flag that investigators couldn't ignore. Brooks Houck became the focus of police attention, and detectives brought him in for questioning. His story was straightforward, almost rehearsed in its simplicity. According to Brooks, on the evening of July 3rd, Crystal and their 2-year-old son had accompanied him to his family's farm. They arrived in the evening, and Brooks claimed he did some chores around the property, set a fire to burn some building materials, and waited for it to die down before heading home. They left the farm around midnight, Brooks said, and when they got home, he went to bed while Crystal stayed up playing games on her phone, as was her habit. When he woke up at 7 a.m., Brooks claimed he found their son in bed with him, but Crystal was gone. He assumed she had gone out, probably to visit her cousin. It wasn't until later that he began to realize something might be wrong. To those who knew Crystal, this story had a glaring problem. Crystal would never have left her 2-year-old son behind, not willingly, not under any circumstances. The bond between mother and child was too strong. If Crystal had left that house, something had forced her to, because she would never have walked away from that little boy on her own. The police asked Brooks to take a polygraph test. The results came back inconclusive, neither confirming nor disproving his story. But the police weren't satisfied. They brought him in for a formal interview, and during that interview, several troubling details emerged. Investigators had obtained surveillance footage from the Houck family farm. The video confirmed that Brooks's truck had indeed entered the property that evening, and it showed the vehicle leaving around midnight, just as Brooks had claimed. But there was a problem. The truck had tinted windows so dark that the police couldn't see who was inside the vehicle. Was Crystal in that truck when it left? Was their son? Or was Brooks alone? The footage couldn't tell them. Then there was the matter of a phone call. On his way home from the farm, Brooks had received a call from a business associate named Steve Lawson. The call lasted only 13 seconds, an oddly brief duration. When police asked about it, Brooks had Steve Lawson call in during the interview to explain. Steve Lawson's explanation was that he had called Brooks to get the numbers for a rental property. Brooks, Steve claimed, told him he would have to wait until he got home because Crystal was the one who handled that sort of information. The police found this explanation highly suspicious. If Crystal was with Brooks in the truck at the time of the call, why couldn't Brooks simply hand her the phone? Why would he need to wait until they got home to ask her a question that could be answered immediately? It seemed like a scripted response, an answer prepared in advance to explain away a suspicious phone call. As the interview continued, Brooks received a phone call from his brother, Nick Houck, who happened to be an officer with the Bardstown Police Department. Nick advised Brooks to leave the interrogation room immediately, and just like that, the interview was over. The police were now convinced that Crystal hadn't simply run away and abandoned her car on the Bluegrass Parkway. The evidence suggested something far more sinister had occurred, and they believed it had happened at the Houck family farm. This theory was reinforced when people began calling the police with reports of seeing Brooks' truck and his brother Nick's police car at the Houck family farm after Crystal's disappearance. The timing of these visits raised serious questions. Were the brothers disposing of evidence? Were they trying to cover up what had happened to Crystal? Detectives decided to bring Nick Houck in for questioning. Nick, as a law enforcement officer himself, knew his rights and understood the game being played. When asked if he had anything to do with Crystal's disappearance, he asserted his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. He also refused to take a polygraph test. Nick's refusal to cooperate was damning, but it wasn't illegal. The police couldn't force him to answer their questions, and they couldn't compel him to take a lie detector test. But his silence spoke volumes. The investigation also revealed troubling information about Crystal's relationship with Brooks. Her sister Brooke told police that Crystal had been planning to leave Brooks. According to Brooke, Brooks had lied to Crystal and showed little emotional attachment to her. Crystal had confided in her mother, Sherry, that she wanted to end the relationship, but she admitted it wouldn't be easy because Brooks was controlling. Crystal's brother, Casey, had also noticed increasing tension between Brooks and Crystal in the weeks before her disappearance. He had witnessed several heated arguments between them, arguments that suggested their relationship was deteriorating rapidly. A picture was emerging of a relationship in crisis, of a woman planning to leave, and of a controlling partner who might not have been willing to let her go. For over a year, Tommy Ballard refused to give up on finding his daughter. He continued organizing search parties, following up on every lead, and keeping Crystal's case in the public eye. He was determined to find out what happened to his daughter and to bring whoever was responsible to justice. Tommy became so involved in the investigation that many believed he was getting close to uncovering the truth. He was asking the right questions, talking to the right people, and piecing together information that might finally crack the case open. On November 19, 2016, Tommy was preparing for another day of searching. It was hunting season, and Tommy was an experienced hunter. That morning, he and his 11-year-old grandson headed out to their property to check on the wildlife and prepare for the season ahead. What happened next would devastate the Ballard family all over again and add another tragic chapter to this already heartbreaking story. Around 7:30 that morning, Sherry Ballard's phone rang. The voice on the other end told her that her husband had been shot. She needed to get to the hospital immediately. Sherry rushed to the scene, her heart pounding, hoping against hope that Tommy would be okay. But when she arrived, she saw the emergency responders surrounding her husband. She watched as they worked desperately to save him. But deep down, Sherry already knew. She could see it in their faces, in the urgency of their movements. Tommy was gone. Tommy Ballard had been shot once in the chest. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Initially, some suggested that Tommy's death might have been a hunting accident. But Sherry was furious at this suggestion. She knew it wasn't an accident. "This is my husband, and it's a murder, and you know it," she told investigators. The investigation into Tommy's death revealed several critical facts. Tommy's weapon had not been fired, ruling out suicide or any accidental self-inflicted wound. The 11-year-old grandson who was with him was also ruled out as a suspect. Eventually, the Kentucky State Police officially announced they were investigating Tommy's death as a homicide. The Ballard family believes Tommy was murdered because he was getting too close to the truth about Crystal's disappearance. They believe that whoever was responsible for harming Crystal wanted Tommy out of the way, fearing that his relentless investigation might finally expose what really happened that July night in 2015. For years, the case remained frustratingly stalled. Crystal was still missing. Tommy's murder remained unsolved. The Ballard family watched as time passed, wondering if they would ever get answers, ever see justice served. But investigations continued behind the scenes. In 2022, the FBI conducted a 5-day investigation into Crystal's disappearance, returning to the Hawk family farm to search for evidence. While they didn't reveal publicly what they found, an FBI spokesperson confirmed that all evidence collected would be analyzed at their laboratory in Quantico, Virginia. The Kentucky Attorney General made a significant decision, appointing a special prosecutor to assist in the prosecution of criminal charges related to both Crystal's disappearance and Tommy's murder. Sherry Ballard wholeheartedly supported this decision. She recognized that having dedicated prosecutors with fresh perspectives and specialized expertise would be crucial to finally achieving justice for her loved ones. Then, in July 2023, the case finally broke open. A grand jury in Kentucky indicted 32-year-old Joseph Lawson on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence in relation to Crystal's disappearance. 2 months later, the arrest that the community had been waiting for finally happened. Brooks Houck was arrested and charged with murder and tampering with physical evidence in connection with Crystal Rogers' death. The judge set his bond at an astronomical $10 million and ordered him to stay away from Crystal's family. The news was bittersweet for the people of Bardstown and for the Ballard family. While they were devastated to have their worst fears confirmed that Crystal was indeed dead and not just missing, there was relief in knowing that someone was finally being held accountable. Justice, it seemed, was finally within reach. Brooks Houck made his first court appearance in October 2023, appearing virtually rather than in person. The hearing proved to be explosive, with prosecutors revealing stunning new information. When the judge asked Special Prosecutor Shane Young if they were investigating any other cases linked to Crystal's disappearance, Young confirmed that they were indeed looking into Tommy Ballard's murder and that they believed the two cases were connected. Then came the bombshell. The special prosecutor announced that they believed they were in possession of the gun that killed Tommy Ballard. They claimed they had purchased the firearm from Nick Houck, Brooks' brother and a police officer. According to prosecutors, Nick had used a fake name during the sale of the weapon. The caliber of the rifle matched the one used to kill Tommy. Prosecutors stated they were examining 5 criteria, and the gun had already matched 4 of them. If confirmed, this would provide a direct link between the Houck family and Tommy Ballard's murder, supporting the family's long-held belief that Tommy was killed because he was getting too close to the truth about Crystal. The prosecutor also made another shocking allegation, that members of the Houck family had secretly recorded grand jury proceedings. According to prosecutors, Brooks's sister, brother, mother, brother-in-law, and mother's boyfriend were all involved in this alleged illegal activity. The implication was clear. The Houck family was coordinating their stories and trying to gain an unfair advantage in the case. Brooks Houck's mother, Rose Mary, refused to answer any questions about these allegations. Brooks's attorneys filed motions to disqualify the judge presiding over the case, claiming the judge had been hostile toward their client since 2017 and that the $10 million bond was excessive and unfair. They argued that their client couldn't receive a fair trial under these circumstances. The Kentucky Appeals Court denied these motions. Brooks Houck would remain in jail on his $10 million bond, and the judge would stay on the case. In December 2023, another indictment came down. Stephen Lawson, father of Joseph Lawson, was also indicted on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. The web of alleged conspiracy was growing wider, suggesting that Crystal's disappearance and death involved multiple people working together. Today, Sherry Ballard continues to fight for justice for both her daughter Crystal and her husband Tommy. She has lost 2 of the people she loved most in the world, and she believes their deaths are connected, that Tommy died because he wouldn't stop searching for Crystal. The community of Bardstown has been forever changed by these events. What happened to Crystal Rogers, and subsequently to Tommy Ballard, has left scars that won't easily heal. But the community has also shown remarkable strength, rallying around the Ballard family, demanding justice, and refusing to forget. For over 8 years, Sherry Ballard has lived with unanswered questions. Where is her daughter's body? What exactly happened that July night in 2015? How many people were involved? Will Tommy's killer ever face justice? The arrests of Brooks Houck, Joseph Lawson, and Stephen Lawson represent significant progress, but for the Ballard family, the journey is far from over. Until Crystal's remains are found and her final resting place can be established, until all those responsible for both her death and Tommy's murder are held fully accountable, there can be no true closure. Crystal Rogers was a devoted mother, a loving daughter, a caring sister. She deserved to watch her children grow up, to grow old, to live the life that was stolen from her on that summer night. Tommy Ballard was a dedicated father who never stopped searching for his daughter, who paid the ultimate price for his love and determination. The disappearance of Crystal Rogers is more than just a true crime case. It's a story about a family's unbreakable love, about a mother's determination to see justice served, and about a community that refused to let these victims be forgotten. As Brooks Houck awaits trial, as the investigation continues, and as prosecutors build their case, one thing remains certain. The Ballard family will not rest until they have the answers they deserve and the justice they've been fighting for since that terrible day in July 2015. Crystal Rogers' story is not yet finished. The final chapter, the chapter where justice is finally, fully served, is still being written. And when that day comes, perhaps Sherry Ballard and her family can finally find some measure of peace, knowing that Crystal and Tommy can rest, and that the truth has finally come to light. This has been the story of Crystal Rogers, a mother who vanished into the night, and a family's unending fight for the truth. It was just past 11 on a quiet December night in Las Vegas. Inside the home of a young military family, everything seemed ordinary. Dinner had been shared, the children were asleep, and the father prepared for another late shift. But as he stepped into the cool night air, the silence shattered. A burst of violence echoed through the neighborhood, and within moments, the home that once symbolized safety and love was transformed into a scene of chaos and fear. What happened that night would expose hidden secrets, unexpected betrayals, and a conspiracy that no one could have imagined. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers, 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Nathan Payet was born on February 12, 1982, on the island of Guam, a Pacific paradise where the ocean is never far away and the traditions of family and community run deep. He was one of 5 children born to Mateo and Carmelina Payet, and from an early age he stood out for his warmth and generosity. Those who knew him described him as loving and respectful, a son who was supportive of his parents, a brother who was always ready to help, and a friend who could light up a room with his playful energy. At cultural gatherings, Nathan was remembered as the best dancer, moving with joy and pride in his heritage. Life on Guam shaped his spirit. He embraced the island's natural beauty, spending his free time surfing and paddleboarding across the turquoise waters. The beaches were his sanctuary, a place where he felt at peace. But Nathan's story was not only about adventure. As a teenager, he fell in love with Michelle, the girl who would become his lifelong partner. They began dating in high school, and before long, they welcomed their first child, starting a family while still very young, but united by devotion and love. Guam, while far from the U.S. mainland, is an unincorporated territory of the United States. This unique status meant that residents like Nathan could serve in the U.S. military. In April 2002, he seized that opportunity and enlisted in the United States Air Force. It was the start of a career that would take him far from home, but never far from the heart of his family. His first assignment brought him to Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska, where he worked as part of the aircraft weapons support team. The move from tropical Guam to the frozen landscapes of Alaska was dramatic, yet Nathan adapted with the same determination that defined his character. In 2006, he transferred to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona, where he became Chief of Weapons Loading for the Thunderbolt Ground Attack Aircraft Squadron. That same year, he married Michelle, the only woman he had ever loved. Together, they celebrated the arrival of their second child, strengthening the bond of a young family that was already proving resilient under the challenges of military life. Nathan's career advanced quickly. By 2007, he was training in logistics preparation and materials management, expanding his expertise. Later, at Nellis Air Force Base, he served as an entry supervisor for the 99th Squadron. That same year, he earned a promotion to junior non-commissioned officer in charge of maintenance supply, overseeing critical support for attack aircraft operations. His work ethic and loyalty stood out, and his service during the Iraq War only added to his reputation as a man who was hardworking, dedicated, and proud to wear the uniform of his country. When he returned from deployment, Nathan was stationed in Las Vegas. By then, he and Michelle were raising 4 children. Their family of 6 was the center of his world. At home, Nathan was not only a husband and father, but also a community figure, coaching a local Dodgers t-ball team, juggling night shifts for extra income, and doing everything he could to give his family the best life possible. Michelle managed the busy household, cared for the children, and worked in telemarketing, all while supporting Nathan through the demands of his military service. Approaching his 28th birthday, Nathan held the rank of technical sergeant. On the surface, life seemed full and steady, marked by hard work, sacrifice, and the joy of raising a growing family. December 1, 2010, began as an ordinary day. Michelle, feeling unwell, came home earlier than usual. The family shared dinner, spent time together, and Nathan, following his routine, dozed off for a short nap in the living room. That evening seemed peaceful, with no hint of the tragedy about to unfold. When his alarm failed to sound, Nathan awoke abruptly at 11 p.m. Realizing he was late for his shift, he rushed to get dressed, pulling on his camouflage uniform before heading out the door around 11:30 p.m. But moments later, the night was shattered. Multiple gunshots rang out, breaking the silence of their quiet neighborhood. Nathan stumbled back into the house, gravely wounded. He had been shot 5 times. Collapsing inside, he left his wife and children in shock and terror. Michelle desperately dialed 911, her voice frantic as she reported her husband's condition. The operator instructed her to perform CPR, but despite the efforts of first responders, Nathan was pronounced dead. The scene was devastating. The garage door stood open, and blood covered the floor, the walls, and even Nathan's workout bench. Inside the vehicle, more blood marked the violence of the attack. Inside the vehicle, more blood marked the violence of the attack. His blood-stained uniform lay on the floor where paramedics had tried to save him. Neighbors who had once thought of their community as safe now stood in disbelief. How could such violence strike a quiet suburban street in Las Vegas? For Michelle and the children, the loss was immeasurable. Nathan had been their protector, their provider, and their source of strength. The investigation would soon focus on the final hours of Nathan's life, piecing together every detail of that day. Michelle, as the main witness, provided her account of events, describing a day that had started as ordinary, only to end in tragedy. When detectives began piecing together the events of that night, they turned first to what those inside the house had witnessed. Michelle recalled hearing two sharp bangs as Nathan left, but fear kept her from looking outside. The children had been startled by the noise, and she focused on calming them down. Moments later, Nathan stumbled back through the door, gravely injured, and collapsed inside. At the crime scene, officers found Nathan's wallet, keys, and all of his personal belongings untouched. Nothing had been taken. For investigators, this was the first clear sign that the shooting was not a random robbery. Whoever pulled the trigger had come with one purpose: to end Nathan's life. Detectives considered that his killer may have been lying in wait, concealed across the street near two vacant homes that stood dark and empty. Whoever did this seemed to know Nathan's schedule and had chosen the exact moment he would be vulnerable, leaving the house for his late shift. Still, detectives could not rule out other possibilities. They questioned whether Nathan had been hiding personal troubles, such as gambling debts, a loan shark demanding repayment, or even an affair that might have made him a target. Yet early checks of his phone told a very different story. There were no suspicious contacts, no secret messages, no unexplained financial transactions. His phone contained only photos of his wife and children. To investigators, it looked like proof that Nathan truly was what people said he was: a devoted husband, a loving father, and a man with no hidden life. As police canvassed the neighborhood, new details began to emerge. Several witnesses mentioned seeing a black car speeding away immediately after the gunshots. Others reported a man in a brown or tan hoodie fleeing the area on foot. These details offered the first possible trail to follow. News of the murder reached Nathan's family back in Guam almost instantly. His parents, Mateo and Carmelina, were devastated. They boarded the first available flight, traveling thousands of miles across the Pacific to Las Vegas. For his mother, the journey was unbearable. She wept the entire way, struggling to grasp that her son was gone. When she arrived, Michelle collapsed into her arms in grief. Nathan's brother Eric and sister-in-law Veronica also rushed to support the family, but they were soon drawn into the investigation themselves. Detectives asked Eric and Veronica about Nathan and Michelle's marriage. On the surface, the couple seemed solid, but Veronica recalled noticing something unsettling during the Thanksgiving holiday just days earlier. At a family gathering, the warmth between Nathan and Michelle appeared strained. It felt, she said, as if they were simply tolerating one another. Eric added that he had noticed the family's kitchen pantry and refrigerator were nearly empty, a sign of growing financial stress. Michelle would later confirm this in a follow-up interview. She admitted that the family had been struggling with money, which explained why Nathan worked exhausting double shifts. She also acknowledged that a co-worker at her telemarketing job drove a car resembling the black vehicle seen near the crime scene. Under questioning, she confessed to occasional flirting with men at work, revealing cracks in the marriage that investigators had not previously known. This led detectives to a man named Michael Rodriguez, a 31-year-old co-worker of Michelle's with a criminal past that included forgery and theft. When approached by police, Michael agreed to speak with them. He denied any romantic interest in Michelle and insisted he had nothing to do with the murder. But the digital evidence began to tell another story. A review of text messages exchanged between Michelle and Michael raised immediate red flags. Just before the crime, Michael had sent a cryptic message referring to a contract and a client named Van Dyke. Investigators suspected this was coded language connected to Nathan's death. At 11:12 p.m., just minutes before Nathan was shot, Michael texted Michelle, saying he hoped she was feeling better and that he was about to finish the Van Dyke contract by morning because it had been such a headache. 2 minutes later, another message followed, thanking her for her help and asking if she needed rest. For detectives, these words were chilling. They suggested coordination, a plan carried out in secret, and a possible conspiracy that now reached far beyond a simple shooting in a suburban neighborhood. At 11:19 p.m., just minutes after Nathan had rushed out the door, Michelle sent Michael a message. She told him she had taken her medication and was going back to sleep, but added that her husband had just left. What struck investigators as deeply suspicious was her casual remark that being late with the contract was a nuisance. The coded language seemed impossible to ignore. When questioned, Michael offered an alibi. He claimed that earlier that night, around 9 p.m., he had been at a well-known department store where he met a woman named Shannon, a former adult film actress. According to his story, the two felt an instant connection and decided to check into the Sunset Station Hotel for a one-night encounter. He insisted they arrived around 11 p.m., a timeline that would have placed him away from the crime scene. With no immediate evidence to contradict his account, detectives had little choice but to release him while they verified his story. But then, a dramatic twist changed the entire direction of the case. A woman came forward, her identity initially kept confidential. It was Shannon. She revealed that Michael's story was not only misleading, it was a cover-up. Tearful and fearful for her own safety, she told investigators she had been coerced into providing a false alibi. Shannon confessed she had been promised a small amount of money. Her account introduced two more names into the investigation: Jessica, a young woman, and her partner Corey, a seasoned criminal with an extensive record that included robbery, auto theft, grand theft, armed robbery, and credit card fraud. On the night of the murder, Shannon said she and Michael had been at Jessica and Corey's apartment in Henderson. Around 11 p.m., Michael and Corey left in a black Cadillac. Jessica told her the men were targeting a heroin dealer and needed Shannon to act as their alibi. While the men were gone, Jessica lit a fire in the fireplace. When Michael and Corey returned, Shannon watched them burn clothing, destroy their phones, and even destroy her own phone to keep her tied to their story. They used bleach to clean and sprayed air freshener throughout the apartment. She was instructed to lie to the police and repeat their version of events. But the most chilling moment came when she overheard one of the men admit that he had shot Nathan. It was not a robbery at all. It was a planned execution. Investigators immediately began to verify her claims. Surveillance footage from the Sunset Station Hotel confirmed Shannon and Michael entered together, but not at 11 p.m. as he had said. They arrived roughly 40 minutes after the crime had already taken place. With this, his alibi collapsed. Armed with Shannon's statement, detectives obtained a search warrant for Jessica and Corey's apartment. Inside, they discovered latex gloves, bottles of air freshener from the same store mentioned earlier, and remnants of burned clothing, all consistent with Shannon's account. Attention turned once again to Michelle. In another round of interrogation, she finally admitted what investigators had already begun to suspect. She confessed to an affair with Michael and acknowledged that he had been the one to push for her husband's death. According to her, the motive was Nathan's military life insurance policy. Together, they had planned that once Nathan was gone, she and Michael would start a new life. Michelle tried to soften her role. She insisted that she had regrets and attempted to sabotage the plan. She explained that she never unlocked Nathan's truck as instructed and even turned off his alarm, hoping he would miss his shift and avoid the ambush. But detectives didn't believe her story. The text messages told a very different tale, one that painted her not as a reluctant bystander, but as an active participant in a deadly conspiracy. While the investigation moved forward, Nathan's loved ones were left to grieve. On Tuesday, December 7, 2010, a memorial service was held at the Chapel of Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. It was a private ceremony attended by his parents, siblings, and fellow service members. Michelle was notably absent. At the service, Nathan was remembered as a proud aviator, a dedicated technical sergeant, and above all, a devoted husband and father. His colleagues spoke of his tireless work ethic and the passion he brought to everything he did. With tears in his eyes, Nathan's brother Eric described him as a loyal and loving sibling, someone who supported everyone around him and seemed incapable of making an enemy. The loss was crushing. But even as the family mourned, police worked relentlessly to ensure justice. Within 6 days of the crime, detectives connected the pieces. On December 8, 2010, they arrested the three conspirators, Michael Rodriguez, 31, Corey, 33, and Jessica, just 23 years old. All were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy. The next day, the final arrest came. Michelle Pei, 29, was taken into custody and charged with armed criminal action, conspiracy to commit a felony, and conspiracy to commit robbery. In her confession, she admitted to a 6-month affair with Michael and acknowledged helping plan her husband's murder. Together, they had imagined a future free of Nathan, but instead, the conspiracy unraveled in less than a week, leaving behind a family shattered and a legacy of betrayal that no one could have imagined. As investigators dug deeper, the full motive behind Nathan's murder came into focus. Beyond the affair with Michael, Michelle stood to gain financially from her husband's death. As the widow of a military officer, she was entitled to a payout of $400,000 from Nathan's military life insurance, plus another $250,000 from a separate policy. Nearly $750,000 was on the line. Pressed by detectives, Michelle admitted that she and Michael began discussing killing Nathan as early as October 2010. She acknowledged that on the night of the crime, she was fully aware her lover and his accomplices were waiting for Nathan to open the garage door and start his car. When Nathan didn't leave at the expected time, Michael began sending her messages. Michelle confessed that her replies, coded in the language of contracts, were meant to let him know Nathan would be late, but that the plan should go ahead. She also revealed chilling details of the alternatives they had considered. One plan involved shooting Nathan in his car, then abandoning the vehicle in an apartment complex, hidden under a cover. Another involved kidnapping him, blindfolding him, and taking him into the desert, where he would be tormented before being killed. Nathan, unaware of the affair or the conspiracy, had no idea his wife was plotting his death. Michelle was ordered held without bail and placed under close supervision at the Clark County Detention Center due to fears she might attempt self-harm. All four accused, Michelle, Michael, Corey, and Jessica, were formally charged with murder with a deadly weapon and conspiracy. Michael and Corey faced additional charges for firearm possession as convicted felons. In front of a grand jury, each pleaded not guilty. Prosecutors informed the judge that the Capital Punishment Review Committee would meet to decide whether the death penalty should be pursued. The process stalled as the defense requested time. arguing they could not proceed until that decision was made. Years of delays followed, but by 2015, justice finally began to unfold. In September of that year, Michael Rodriguez reached a deal to avoid execution by pleading guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of appeal or parole. The following month, Michelle appeared in court, facing the sorrowful stares of Nathan's parents. Breaking down in tears, she apologized to them and to her children. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and to first-degree murder with a deadly weapon. Though she claimed Michael had pressured her and that she had lost control of the situation, the evidence showed otherwise. Her text messages revealed intent, planning, and full participation. In 2016, Corey also admitted guilt to avoid the death penalty. His attorney asked for a chance at parole, but the judge denied it, calling Corey a continuing danger to society. He was sentenced to life without parole. Jessica, meanwhile, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. Though she had been present when the crime was planned and evidence destroyed, she received a far lighter punishment, reported as house arrest. The final and most anticipated sentencing came on March 3, 2016. Michelle once again stood before the judge. Crying, she admitted Nathan had been a good man and that her choices were unforgivable. She begged her in-laws to one day find the strength to forgive her. The prosecution reminded the court that lonely wife syndrome was no excuse for conspiring to kill a husband. Michelle, they said, was a manipulator, using tears, money, and sex to lure others into her plot, all while pretending to be a wife and mother at home. The defense argued she had been under Michael's influence, but the judge rejected that claim. In his ruling, he called Michelle's actions incomprehensible and deeply insidious. He expressed disbelief that she could sleep beside Nathan night after night, knowing she was plotting his death. He declared her a major participant in the crime, not a victim of manipulation. At the hearing, Nathan's mother was granted guardianship of his 4 children. She said that as a woman of faith, she chose to forgive Michelle for her soul's sake, but added that the damage done to the children was beyond forgiveness. Despite therapy, they remained traumatized, startled by loud noises, and fearful that their mother might harm them too. Finally, Michelle was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She would never walk free again. For Nathan's family, the sentence closed a painful chapter, though the wounds remained. In the judge's words, nothing could undo the betrayal of a wife who had turned her husband's devotion into a death sentence. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. It was a cold January afternoon in Baltimore, 1999. The school day had ended, and a bright, talented young woman got into her car, ready to pick up her cousin before heading to work. But somewhere between the classroom and her evening shift, she vanished. Hours later, she never arrived home. Days turned into weeks, and the community's worry grew into fear. Whispers began to spread about love, jealousy, and secrets that no one wanted to believe. When the truth finally surfaced, it would ignite one of the most controversial and debated cases in modern American true crime. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Hae Min Lee was born on October 15, 1980, in South Korea. Her childhood was shaped by her mother, John Kim, who raised Hae Min and her younger brother with determination and care. In 1992, when Hae Min was just 11 years old, the family made a life-changing decision. They left South Korea and moved to the United States, settling in Maryland, where they stayed with her grandparents. From the beginning, Hae Min stood out. She was gifted both in academics and in sports. At school, she joined an advanced program for high-achieving students near Baltimore, excelling not only in the classroom but also on the field. She became a talented athlete, playing lacrosse and hockey with skill and passion. By the time she reached her teenage years, she had built a reputation as a bright, mature, and independent young woman. At 17, she also worked part-time at an optician's office, balancing school, sports, and responsibilities with impressive discipline. In April of 1998, Hae Min began dating a classmate, Adnan Syed. He had been born in the United States to conservative Pakistani Muslim parents. While his family's traditions forbade dating, alcohol, or drugs, Adnan often broke those rules in secret. On the surface, he seemed like the model American teenager, well-liked, a football player, part of the track team, and even trained as an emergency medical technician. He had been elected prom prince, and his peers described him as charming and easy to get along with. Their relationship unfolded like many high school romances: sweet gestures, emotional highs, and disagreements that sometimes led to breakups and reconciliations. Hae Min often wrote about Adnan in her diary, describing him as sweet and caring, recalling moments like when he surprised her with a rose during class. But religion soon became a heavy shadow over their bond. Adnan confessed that loving her felt like a sin within his faith. That conflict became painfully clear on Halloween night, when his parents discovered their relationship and reacted publicly, causing Hae Min to end things the following day. Yet, within weeks, the two found their way back to each other. By November, they were dating again, and Hae Min admitted in her diary that she still loved him. Adnan would visit her at the optician's office where she worked, but by December, Hae Min's attention began to shift. She developed feelings for Don Clindens, a 22-year-old co-worker. Don's mother managed the optical shop, and Don himself was supportive, kind, and mature. He admired Hae Min's confidence, and she felt drawn to him in ways she had never fully experienced before. In her writings, Hae Min admitted feeling torn between the two men. Adnan knew about her doubts, and the weight of cultural and religious differences only added to her inner struggle. Hae Min wanted a relationship where she could be herself, openly involved with her partner's family, without secrecy or shame. She had never told her own relatives about Adnan, and over time she felt that she was losing part of who she was. By mid-December, she finally ended the relationship with Adnan. Soon after, she began dating Dawn, who offered the stability and openness she longed for. With her senior year ahead of her, a promising romance, and outstanding academic achievements, Hae Min appeared to be heading toward a future filled with hope. But only weeks later, everything would change. On January 13th, 1999, Min was seen leaving school around 2:15 p.m. She got into her car, planning to pick up her younger cousin from daycare by 3:15 before heading to her shift at work. It was a routine day, one of countless others, but this time she never made it. She vanished without a trace. For a girl as responsible as Min, disappearing like this was unthinkable. Her family quickly realized something was wrong and contacted the police. That evening, around 6:30, investigators reached out to Adnan, who explained that the last time he had seen her was earlier at school. They also questioned Don, who stated that he had been at work from 9 in the morning until 6 that evening and hadn't seen her at all that day. The authorities expressed deep concern. Min had no history of family conflict, no reason to run away, and no signs of trouble in her life. Her sudden disappearance was more than alarming. It was the beginning of a mystery that would shake her community and haunt everyone who knew her. In the days and weeks that followed, the absence of any sign from Min plunged her mother into unbearable anguish. Each day without answers made the silence heavier. Then, almost 4 weeks after her disappearance, on February 9th, a shocking call came into the police. A local resident reported finding what appeared to be a human foot, partially buried in a shallow grave. Authorities rushed to the scene. In the vast forest park where the discovery had been made, officers uncovered a body. The place already carried a grim reputation, for this was not the first time someone had been buried there. Soon, investigators confirmed what Min's family had feared the most. It was her. She was just 18 years old. The autopsy revealed that the cause of death was manual strangulation, a detail that made the crime even more devastating. News of her death spread quickly, and the community came together in grief, holding vigils and paying tribute to a young woman whose life had ended far too soon. Police first looked into the man who had found the body. He explained that he had pulled over after drinking a beer while driving, stepped into the woods to relieve himself, and then stumbled upon the horrifying scene. His story was checked, but nothing suspicious surfaced. Investigators then turned their attention to Don, Min's new boyfriend. His work records placed him at his job from morning until evening that day. Once again, no suspicious evidence was found. Just as the investigation seemed to stall, an anonymous phone call changed everything. On the other end of the line, the caller gave police a name: Adnan. The tipster suggested he was responsible and even claimed that he had threatened Min's life before. Detectives began carefully reconstructing the couple's relationship. Friends painted a complicated picture. Some said Adnan sometimes felt Min didn't love him enough, while others recalled that Min found him controlling and disliked being told what to do. Her independent nature clashed with his expectations. Stephanie, a close friend, revealed that Adnan had not expected Min to leave him for someone else. In her diary, Min herself admitted that the breakup had been difficult for him to accept. She wrote that she loved him, so how could her feelings have changed so suddenly? It was a question many teenagers might ask. Yet others noticed a darker side. One of her friends described him as jealous and paranoid by early December, often asking if she was being unfaithful. Then came a discovery that deeply troubled investigators. Among Min's belongings, they found a note in which Adnan threatened to kill her. It matched what the anonymous caller had described. Still, there were contradictions. Around the holidays, Adnan and Min had exchanged Christmas gifts and even helped each other when their cars broke down, gestures that suggested they were still on good terms. To detectives, This raised the possibility that Adnan believed they would eventually get back together, just as they had before. But by New Year's Day, Min was moving forward. She had gone on her first official date with Dawn. For Adnan, the reality of that new relationship may not have been clear until January 5th. That was when detectives believed he first learned of Dawn. To understand more, they pulled his phone records and examined who he had spoken to that day. One name stood out: Jennifer. At first, her account seemed unremarkable, but the next day, she returned to the station with a lawyer, and her story changed dramatically. Jennifer claimed that Adnan had spent time with his friend Jay on the day of the disappearance. And she went further, stating that Jay had confided in her, saying Adnan had killed Min. This revelation gave the police a new lead. They brought Jay in for questioning. During interviews, Jay said that Adnan had indeed spoken about killing Min, especially after learning about Dawn. He described Adnan as someone unaccustomed to losing, and while he initially hadn't taken the word seriously, detectives believe they revealed a dangerous mindset. The pressure on Adnan grew even stronger when they learned of a detail that may have fueled his anger. On January 9th, just days before her death, Min had updated her social media profile, openly declaring Dawn as the new love of her life. On January 12th, just one day before the crime, Adnan obtained a brand new cell phone. The contract was not even in his own name, but in the name of a friend from the mosque. That night, he called several people, supposedly to share his new number. Among those calls were multiple attempts to reach Min. For investigators, this detail became one more piece in a growing puzzle. By February 28, 1999, 6 weeks after Min's disappearance, police moved in and arrested Adnan. At the press briefing that followed, they not only laid out the relationship he had with Min, but also suggested that his motive could have been rooted in an overwhelming fatal attraction. The arrest sent shockwaves through Baltimore's Muslim community. Many who knew Adnan insisted it was impossible. To them, he had always been a kind and respectful young man, deeply committed to his faith, with no ties to violence or crime. Some believe the police, under immense pressure to solve the case, had targeted the wrong person. Min's family, however, felt no such doubt. Her mother, devastated by the loss, wanted justice, and she believed only a harsh sentence for Adnan would deliver it. Adnan, for his part, held firmly to his innocence. He explained that on the afternoon Min disappeared, he had been at the library with a girl named Asia McLean. He insisted he never would have harmed Min, claiming he still loved and respected her. When detectives pressed him about the phone calls the night before, Adnan argued that it had been Min who called him, asking for reconciliation. But investigators found that explanation hard to believe. Min couldn't have known his new number so soon. She only wrote it in her diary after that call. And her final diary entry, written after spending the entire day with Dawn, declared how much she loved her new boyfriend. To detectives, the idea of reconciliation seemed highly unlikely. Eventually, Adnan was formally charged with first-degree murder. Things became even more complicated when, in March, Jay was brought in for another round of questioning. This time, his testimony went further than before. Jay claimed that Adnan had confessed to the killing and that he himself had helped bury Min's body. According to Jay, Adnan called him after the crime and later picked him up, showing him Min's body in the trunk of his car. In a dramatic turn, Jay then led police to a crucial piece of evidence: the location of Min's car, which until then had been missing. This revelation gave the case a new level of credibility in the eyes of prosecutors. When the trial began in early 2000, the prosecution leaned heavily on two elements: the cell phone tower records, which placed Adnan's phone near the forest park that night, and Jay's testimony. Yet Jay's story was not perfectly consistent. While the core details remained the same, he shifted timelines, changing the hour when Adnan supposedly called him and the moment he claimed to have seen Hai Min's body. The defense seized on these inconsistencies, arguing that Jay's account was unreliable. Beyond that, there was no direct physical evidence linking Adnan to the crime. His fingerprints and DNA were not found in Hai Min's car. Asia McClain was willing to testify as an alibi witness, but for reasons that remain unclear, the defense never called her to the stand. After 6 weeks of testimony, on February 26, 2000, the verdict was announced. Adnan was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, with more than 30 years added on top. Just a month later, Jay pleaded guilty to being an accessory and was given 2 years of probation. The following year, Adnan's defense filed an appeal, arguing among other points that the failure to call Asia as a witness had severely weakened his case. But the appeal was denied, and the conviction stood firm. As the years passed, Hai Min's case refused to fade away. It drew international attention, and soon independent journalists and private investigators began re-examining the evidence. Their work gave rise to new theories, each suggesting that perhaps Adnan had not been the true killer. But if not him, then who? One of the most discussed possibilities pointed directly at Jay. Some argued that he had killed Hai Min himself and then framed Adnan to deflect suspicion. The reasoning varied. According to one version, Hai Min had threatened to report him to police for selling drugs. Another claimed she had caught him cheating on Stephanie. Either scenario, supporters of this theory argued, could have given Jay a reason to silence her permanently. Yet the theory had serious flaws. There was no solid evidence against him, and Hai Min never wrote anything in her diary suggesting such a discovery. In fact, Hai Min was not close to Jay at all, making it unlikely she would have been alone with him in a setting that allowed for such a crime. Another variation suggested that Jay and Jennifer might have acted together, eliminating Hai Min and framing Adnan. This theory speculated that Jay and Jennifer had been romantically involved, and Hai Min had uncovered their secret. But again, the same issues remained. Neither of them had a close connection to Hai Min, and there was no clear way they could have lured her into a meeting alone. Worse still, no physical evidence supported such a claim. Attention then shifted to Don, Hai Min's boyfriend at the time of her death. His alibi, which initially seemed solid, began to draw questions. The confirmation of his work schedule had come from his own mother, who managed the optical shop. Later, some noted that the log sheet carried an employee number that did not match his. Adding to suspicions, police were unable to reach Don until 1 in the morning after Hai Min's disappearance. He had told investigators he returned home around 7 that evening, but he never followed up with them as promised. Another name floated into speculation: the man who had found Hai Min's body. While his story was consistent, he had pulled off the road after drinking a beer and stumbled upon the shallow grave. Later reports revealed he had a criminal record, but his past was tied to compulsive exhibitionism, not violence. He underwent 2 polygraph tests, failing the first and passing the second. Experts warned that nervousness could easily explain those results, and more importantly, there was no logical reason for the killer to lead police directly to the victim's remains. Without a clear motive, this theory quickly weakened. Meanwhile, online forums and true crime communities added fuel to speculation. Users compared Hai Min's case to other unsolved murders in the same period, floating ideas about a potential serial offender. But investigators dismissed these claims after finding no evidence that linked those cases to Hyman's death. In the end, despite all the speculation, detectives and prosecutors returned to the same conclusion: Adnan. He was the one with motive, means, and opportunity. Years later, the legal battle reignited. In 2012, Adnan once again fought to overturn his conviction. The following year, however, his appeal was denied. But in 2015, the Court of Special Appeals of Maryland granted a pause in proceedings, and the case was sent back to Circuit Court for review. The question this time was crucial: should Asia McClain's testimony finally be considered? By November of that same year, the higher court agreed to reopen the case. Throughout the long legal process, one factor proved decisive: the independent journalistic investigations. Reporters and private researchers highlighted inconsistencies in the case and questioned the reliability of the evidence that had once secured a conviction. Central to this re-examination was the testimony of Asia McClain, along with doubts about the cell phone tower location data presented at the original trial. According to the defense, those records, especially incoming calls, were confusing and should never have been used to persuade a jury. In November 2015, a judge agreed to reopen the case in the interest of justice. From February 3rd to 9th, 2016, a new hearing drew national attention. Asia herself testified under oath, affirming that she had indeed spoken with Adnan in the library on January 13, 1999, the very day Hyman disappeared. On June 13, 2016, the judge granted Adnan a new trial, ruling that his original defense team had failed to properly challenge the cell phone location evidence. Later that year, his lawyers requested his release on bail while waiting for the retrial, but the motion was denied on December 29th. 2 years later, Maryland's Court of Special Appeals reviewed the case again, but in 2019, the Court of Appeals reversed the decision, blocking the new trial. For Hyman's family, it was confirmation that justice had been served, and they felt it was finally time to move forward. Then, in 2021, the legal landscape changed. A new state law allowed individuals convicted of crimes committed as minors, who had already served more than 20 years in prison, to petition the court for relief. In 2022, a Baltimore court reopened the case once more, citing serious concerns about the effectiveness of Adnan's original defense. As a result, he was released from custody while the legal process continued. By September 2023, Adnan held a press conference. Standing before reporters, he once again declared his innocence, but this time he went further. Through a detailed visual presentation with slides, he accused the prosecution of misconduct, arguing they had failed to disclose information about possible alternative suspects. He also spoke about the toll the case had taken on his family over the decades. Finally, in March 2025, a Baltimore judge issued a dramatic ruling. The court upheld Adnan's conviction but modified the sentence, acknowledging that he had already served more than enough time behind bars. Adnan was granted parole for 5 years. Though technically still guilty in the eyes of the law, he would not return to prison. Both the prosecution and the defense agreed he no longer posed a danger to society. Now, more than 2 decades later, the case of Hai Min Lee and Adnan Syed remains one of the most debated in true crime history. Was justice truly served, or did errors and omissions alter the course of the trial? Did Adnan commit the crime, or was he the victim of a flawed system? The questions remain, and the final word may never come. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.